If you've ever visited Pattaya, the first memory often isn't a single landmark or street. It's a feeling, a sense of constant motion, a mix of noise, lights, and energy that hits the moment you step off the bus or taxi. For decades, Pattaya has been Thailand's city of tourism extremes. It's a place that can feel simultaneously chaotic and predictable, wild and controlled. Walking down Walking Street at night, the neon lights seem endless, spilling onto the sidewalks and streets, accompanied by music that rises from every open doorway. Bars compete for attention with their signs, their playlists, and their crowds, creating a sensory experience that almost feels like its own ecosystem. Yet Pattaya is more than just neon and nightlife. By day, the beaches tell a different story. Jomtien, Pattaya, Wang Amat, each has its own personality. Some are crowded and busy, where sunbathers line the sand in neat rows, while others are quieter, offering space to breathe. Vendors weave between umbrellas and loungers selling snacks, drinks, and beach toys. The smell of sunscreen mixes with salt air and occasional hints of street food. Hotels, too, define the city's identity. Budget guest houses stand alongside mid-range accommodations, family-friendly resorts, and high-end properties overlooking the Gulf of Thailand. For every backpacker trying to stretch a budget, there was a hotel that fit. For honeymooners or luxury travelers, there were rooms with infinity pools and ocean views. Pattaya had been carefully built to cater to a full spectrum of visitors, each with a version of the city designed for their experience. Shopping, too, added to the rhythm. From local markets to large malls, Pattaya was always the city in motion. Visitors could buy souvenirs, clothing, or high-end goods within blocks of the beach. The sounds of bargaining, laughter, and music spilled into the streets, blending with traffic and the hum of motorbikes. For residents and long-term workers, tourism wasn't just an industry. It was a heartbeat that defined daily life. Before 2020, Pattaya welcomed millions of visitors each year. Streets felt full even during shoulder seasons. Tours departed like clockwork every morning, and nightlife extended well past midnight. The city was designed for volume. Restaurants, bars, and hotels depended on steady streams of people to create energy, and Pattaya thrived on that motion. For decades, the city's growth seemed unstoppable. New hotels were added, streets widened, and infrastructure expanded to absorb more visitors. Pattaya could handle crowds that would overwhelm other towns, making it feel larger than life but somehow manageable. Visitors rarely questioned whether Pattaya could slow down. It always felt permanent, resilient, and in constant motion. But that version of Pattaya, the city of endless energy, is starting to feel distant. Even now, the streets and beaches may look familiar. The neon lights still glow, the waves still lap the shore. The palm trees still sway. But there's a subtle tension, an emptiness beneath the surface that hints at a city no longer quite as full as it once was. Pattaya hasn't disappeared, but it is changing. And for anyone who remembers it from before, the difference, quiet, almost imperceptible at first, is impossible to ignore. Arriving in Pattaya today feels familiar at first. Taxis wait outside the airport, hotels open their doors, and restaurants serve meals. The streets still carry the hum of traffic, motorbikes weaving between cars, and the occasional call of a street vendor. To a first-time visitor, it may seem as though the city hasn't changed much at all. But the difference becomes noticeable once you start moving through the city. Walking Street, once the heartbeat of Pattaya's nightlife, still glows with neon. The music still pours from open bars, the signs still compete for attention. Yet the energy is uneven. Certain bars and clubs remain lively, but just a few doors down, establishments sit dark, shuttered, or sparsely attended. The constant roar of crowds that used to define the street has thinned into clusters of visitors moving sporadically from one venue to another. The beaches tell a similar story. Pattaya Beach, once packed with sunbathers and tourists playing in the surf, now stretches with empty patches of sand. Chairs and umbrellas are spread farther apart. Vendors wait patiently for customers, sometimes without anyone approaching. The rhythm of the waves is the same, but the rhythm of human activity, the ebb and flow of people, has slowed. Hotels and resorts are operating, but not always at full capacity. Lobbies that once buzzed with arrivals feel quieter. Staff are present, attentive, and professional, yet the sheer number of visitors has dropped below the level required to create the familiar buzz. Breakfast buffets, previously bustling with early risers, now feel half empty. Small guest houses and mid-range hotels operate more cautiously, often with fewer staff than before, waiting for the next wave of tourists to arrive. Even during the day, streets that were once lively now have pockets of quiet. Shops display merchandise, but customers are fewer. Street vendors and massage parlors still operate, but many days pass with less foot traffic than they expected. Tours, which used to depart multiple times a day, now run less frequently, and some activities require advance booking rather than spontaneous participation. The difference is subtle, but it's noticeable to those who have seen Pattaya in its prime. It's not abandonment. It's not decay. It's a city that is functioning, but at a reduced pace, as if it is adapting to fewer visitors and slower energy. For first-time travelers, Pattaya may still feel vibrant enough with its beaches, restaurants, and nightlife. But for returning visitors, the contrast is unmistakable. The city doesn't feel empty in a literal sense, but it feels lighter, quieter, and more deliberate. A space designed for constant motion now highlights the absence of crowds, creating a strange mix of familiarity and eeriness. And that subtle change, almost imperceptible at first, sets the stage for a visitor's perception. Pattaya is still here, it is still functioning, but it is no longer the city of endless energy that people remember. One of the first things that repeat visitors notice about Pattaya today isn't the lights, the beaches, or the nightlife. It's the price of being here. Pattaya has never been Thailand's cheapest destination. Even decades ago, travelers knew that staying here carried a premium compared to inland cities. Beachfront resorts, mid-range hotels, and popular restaurants always cost more than a similar experience elsewhere, but what's different now is how steadily and quietly those costs have increased, affecting the way people plan, spend, and experience their trips. Hotels are the most noticeable change. Mid-range accommodations that once offered a reliable balance between comfort and affordability are now creeping closer to luxury pricing. Rooms that were previously accessible for travelers on a budget now demand a premium, even when the amenities haven't changed much. Couples, families, and solo travelers alike pause before booking, comparing Pattaya to nearby destinations that provide similar experiences at lower cost. Food and dining have shifted too. Street food remains cheap, but the casual restaurants and beachfront cafes that once felt reasonable now carry higher prices. Breakfasts, lunch specials, and local dishes appear slightly heavier on the bill than expected, creating a subtle friction in the perception of value. Tourists who come for the authentic experience may find themselves reconsidering which restaurants or cafes to try. Transportation adds another layer. Short trips by taxi, tuk-tuk, or motorbike can quickly accumulate costs, especially when combined with excursions or day tours. Activities like island hopping or adventure trips, which once felt spontaneous and affordable, now require more planning and financial consideration. For travelers accustomed to flexible spending, these incremental increases gradually shift the way they navigate the city. This isn't an overnight transformation. The change is gradual, almost invisible to first-time visitors. But for returning travelers, the difference is unmistakable. The sense of ease, affordability, and spontaneity that once defined Pattaya has become harder to find. Small increases across multiple aspects of the trip, lodging, food, transport, and activities, add up, quietly influencing decisions. The subtle rise in costs also interacts with the city's current state of emptiness. A hotel room may cost more than expected, yet the lobby feels quiet. A beachfront restaurant may charge higher prices, but tables remain half empty. The disconnect between what travelers are paying and what they're experiencing creates a sense of hesitation, a moment where they ask themselves, is this really worth it? And that hesitation matters. It changes behavior in small but meaningful ways. Visitors stay fewer nights. They skip certain activities, they eat at simpler restaurants, or avoid nightlife entirely. Over time, these small decisions accumulate, reducing overall energy, slowing the city's rhythm, and reinforcing the perception that Pattaya isn't as full or lively as it once was. In Pattaya, the rising cost isn't dramatic or shocking. It doesn't push travelers away overnight. Instead, it quietly reshapes the experience, influencing perception and behavior and creating an environment where the city feels lighter, slower, and less certain. For decades, Pattaya held a near unquestioned position as one of Thailand's top destinations. It wasn't the only city with beaches, nightlife, or hotels, but it had a combination that few others could match. The convenience of Bangkok nearby, the variety of accommodations, and the sheer volume of entertainment options made it the default choice for both first-time visitors and returning tourists. But over the last several years, the tourism landscape has shifted. Other destinations in Thailand and across Southeast Asia have begun attracting the same travelers who once flocked to Pattaya, offering similar experiences with subtle differences that appeal to modern preferences. Hua Hin, for instance, has carved out a reputation for calm beaches, a more family-friendly atmosphere, and a slower pace that contrasts sharply with Pattaya's bustle. Families and couples seeking a quieter experience find themselves drawn there. The beaches are clean, the resorts modern, and the vibe relaxed, a city scaled to feel full even with fewer visitors. Krabi and its islands have also risen in prominence. Towering limestone cliffs, clear waters, and a mix of boutique hotels and budget accommodations make these destinations highly appealing. Travelers now have options where the natural beauty is combined with manageable crowds. Koh Samui, Koh Tao, and other Thai islands offer similar advantages: smaller scale, a sense of discovery, and experiences that feel intentional rather than mass-produced. Beyond Thailand, competition comes from regional destinations as well. Vietnam's coastline, Indonesia's islands, and the Philippines' beaches are growing in popularity. These destinations have invested heavily in infrastructure, making travel easier, hotels more modern, and overall experiences smoother. Many offer lower costs for comparable quality, which naturally attracts travelers who might once have chosen Pattaya by default. What Pattaya didn't anticipate is how modern travelers behave. They research extensively, compare destinations side by side, and are less likely to accept inconvenience simply because a city is famous. Convenience, value, and consistency now weigh as heavily as nightlife or beachfront proximity. Pattaya's appeal, which once relied on volume and reputation, now competes against smaller, more nimble cities that can adapt quickly to changing expectations. This shift exposes Pattaya's vulnerability. The city was built for mass tourism, large hotels, expansive entertainment districts, and beaches lined with umbrellas and vendors. Its scale, once a strength, now makes the emptiness more apparent. While smaller destinations can feel vibrant with fewer people, Pattaya's infrastructure emphasizes the difference between potential and reality. Returning visitors notice this most clearly. The energy that once seemed infinite now fluctuates. Crowded bars are interspersed with quiet. Once bustling beaches are interrupted by stretches of sand with no umbrellas or tourists. Even the neighborhoods surrounding the city show signs of change with reduced foot traffic, partially closed shops, and quieter streets. Competition isn't just external, it shapes perception. Travelers who might have once automatically chosen Pattaya now consider alternatives that feel newer, cleaner, and more consistent. The city's reputation for constant motion is no longer enough to secure loyalty. And that shift is subtle but meaningful. It doesn't happen overnight, but over time, it quietly reduces visitor numbers, changes behavior, and creates a sense that Pattaya is no longer the dominant, vibrant destination it once was. Pattaya was built for movement. Its streets, hotels, and entertainment districts were designed for constant flow. Tourists arriving, departing, wandering, spending, and consuming in almost endless cycles. For decades, this motion defined the city's rhythm. Then in early 2020, that rhythm stopped. The pandemic hit Pattaya hard and fast. International borders closed, flights ceased, and tourists, the city's lifeblood, vanished almost overnight. Hotels shuttered, bars and restaurants were forced to close, and many small businesses saw revenue dry up in days. For a city accustomed to millions of visitors annually, this sudden halt was unprecedented. Some businesses managed to survive by taking on debt or by cutting services to a minimum. Others adapted by switching to delivery, online booking, or offering domestic-focused packages. But the losses were still staggering, and many smaller establishments, family-run guest houses, boutique hotels, and independent bars, simply never reopened. Staff who had worked in Pattaya for years were laid off, returning to hometowns or even leaving Thailand entirely. For some, returning was impossible, and for others, the allure of Pattaya faded under the weight of uncertainty. Even as tourism slowly returned, recovery has been uneven. Certain areas, like the central tourist hubs, began to see visitors again, but only partially. Walking Street, once bursting with activity, reopened in stages, with some bars, clubs, and restaurants remaining closed or operating sporadically. Beachfront resorts started filling rooms again, but occupancy rarely reached pre-pandemic levels. Hotels operated with reduced staff, sometimes leaving lobbies quieter than visitors expected. Breakfast buffets and common areas, once lively with chatter, now feel restrained. Neighborhoods outside the main tourist areas also show lasting effects. Streets are quieter, with fewer foot traffic and less consistent activity. Local markets, small shops, and street vendors operate, but the energy that once defined the city is diminished. For many, the contrast between pre-pandemic Pattaya and today is stark. The impact is not only physical, but psychological. Business owners face uncertainty. When will enough tourists return to justify full staffing? When will revenues stabilize? How long before investments in upgrades or renovations pay off? Staff members weigh whether to remain in the city or seek more stable opportunities elsewhere. This ongoing tension subtly shapes the city's energy, making it slower, quieter, and more deliberate. Infrastructure designed for abundance now emphasizes scarcity. Large hotels, extensive entertainment districts, and wide streets were built to accommodate millions of visitors. But today, even modest crowds highlight the emptiness. Spaces that once buzzed with energy now feel oversized, creating an odd visual impression, a city operating but under capacity. Yet Pattaya continues to function. Airlines land, taxis transport passengers, hotels check in guests, and tours depart. The city hasn't collapsed. Its beauty, culture, and beaches remain intact. But the pause, the reduction in visitors, and the uneven recovery have left a mark, subtle yet undeniable. The pandemic didn't just stop tourism temporarily. It exposed the city's vulnerabilities, accelerated structural strain, and shifted traveler behavior in ways that are still unfolding. Pattaya is still here, still active, but its rhythm has changed. And for those who remember the city in its peak years, the difference is tangible, almost haunting. Pattaya isn't empty in the literal sense. Planes still arrive, hotels still welcome guests, restaurants still serve meals, and tours continue to operate. Life goes on. Yet there is a feeling, almost imperceptible at first, that something has changed. A quiet tension in the city's rhythm that visitors sense as soon as they arrive. Walking Street, the once ceaseless heart of Pattaya nightlife, still glows with neon. Music pours from open doors, and a handful of tourists move from bar to bar, but the streets no longer pulse with the energy that once defined them. Lively venues are interspersed with shuttered storefronts, and the constant roar of crowds has been replaced by pockets of quiet. The neon lights remain, but they illuminate empty spaces more than bustling ones, creating an eerie contrast. The beaches tell a similar story. Pattaya Beach, Jomtien, and Wang Amat still showcase golden sand and clear water, yet stretches of empty shoreline stand out. Umbrellas sit, unoccupied vendors wait for customers who never arrive, and the ebb and flow of human activity that once complemented the natural rhythm of the waves has slowed. For returning visitors, the absence is noticeable. For first-time visitors, the difference is subtler, but it changes the experience nonetheless. Hotels and resorts continue to operate, but with fewer staff and reduced occupancy. Lobbies feel quieter, buffets less crowded, and amenities less bustling. Small guest houses and mid-range hotels do what they can to maintain service, but even professional hospitality can't entirely compensate for the reduced energy. Large resorts built to accommodate hundreds of guests now highlight the emptiness when occupancy is low. Even daily commerce has shifted. Street vendors, local markets, and small shops operate, yet foot traffic has thinned. Tours run less frequently, nightlife is sporadic, and the constant motion that once defined Pattaya has slowed into a more deliberate, quieter pace. The city is not abandoned, but it is no longer overflowing with the constant flow of visitors that once gave it life. The perception of emptiness is subtle but significant. It influences behavior, visitor satisfaction, and even future planning. Travelers notice gaps where they expect energy. They compare current experiences to memories, photos, or social media representations of Pattaya at its peak. And over time, these small perceptions can shift decisions, choosing fewer nights, skipping activities, or exploring alternative destinations altogether. So is Pattaya becoming a ghost city? Not in the literal sense. It has not collapsed, nor is it abandoned, but in a symbolic sense, it is quieter, slower, and less predictable than it once was. A city built for mass tourism now highlights the absence of crowds and the consequences of changing travel patterns. Pattaya remains beautiful, active, and welcoming. Its streets, beaches, and nightlife are still there. Yet the city carries change, expectation, and adaptation. And that combination is enough to make both returning visitors and locals pause, reflect, and ask, is this the Pattaya we knew, or is it slowly becoming a ghost of itself?